you know me. You've watched the show. I am an Evi hater. I am a public Evi hater. I am quote retweeting and hating on him. I am posting Twitters of I'm posting tweets of his entire match history, all of his deaths, flaming him. I'm calling out random deaths. I'm retweeting my friends that are calling him an animal.
This is another episode of the Best Damn League show. Before I get to introducing the guests and all that, obviously me and Dom are here. I've just got to say something briefly about how we're going to do this episode. So the problem is, and this is actually something we've run into every single split of doing Best Damn League show, which is in the modern day, they do this weird thing, especially with this new format, where because you have like the week off, it means that it's actually really difficult to do talk shows. Because here's the thing, when I look at what I think people want from talk shows like Power Spike on the same network, Summoning Insight, they don't really just want like analysis. They want like sort of hot takes, reactions, updates on like immediately what you think about the games that just happened. So the problem with the week off is this. In theory, if we actually want to just do the next episode the best, we should just take a week off ourselves and come back next week and do like a preview of the groups. But if we do that, we're basically acting like the most important week of the season part at the beginning, the BO1s, didn't happen. And you'll never get an update. You'll never actually get to see, did Thorin ever have to own up to the fact that he picked two teams this year to be number one, who finished in last place, XL and Vitality, two even different orgs. Will I ever have to do it? Well, spoiler, I am going to, because we're going to do this episode. We're joined here by Coach SeeEl. And what we're going to do is this one's mainly going to be about what just happened in the BO1s, and we'll just lightly touch on the groups. And then next week, me and Dom will just come back with a two-man show. We'll go balls deep on all the matchups in the groups, the potential outcomes, all that good jazz, and we'll do it that way, right? But first things first, before we start, SeeEl, you've obviously been on a past episode. I will say, it was early on in your sort of podcast career, a little bit dry at times there, mate. It's all good, though. It's all good. And like usual, like most coaches, you got a little bit defensive, because what happens is you see things in scrims. You're talking to people over beverages and drinks, you know. And so you're thinking, they don't really know what's going on here. But I've just got to give you a quick piece of advice, right? One thing I've started doing on these shows, SeeEl, is I like to bring props along. You know, like just like when you're teaching kids in kindergarten, you know, I like to be illustrative. So in the past, I had the chicken on a skateboard. People might know it became a well-loved icon piece of lore on this show. I've got another one for you. So what I've got is this. On this episode, I just want you to keep one thing in mind. This is a teaching tool here, SeeEl. Right? This is a sheep, right? But look, he's wearing glasses, but look closer, they're sunglasses. So here's the thing. Even though you are a nerd, you've got glasses on yourself, you're cool. You're on the shoulders. You be cool. Wear the sunglasses. But don't be a sheep, though. Don't be a sheep wearing sunglasses. Don't just go into group think and all stuff about just only, you know, be an animal. You know, give us some legit opinions, but just don't be a sheep. Just don't go into the group think. So welcome to the show, SeeEl.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. Honestly, I was a bit worried about getting in trouble last time.
Okay.
And you always have to like
shows. Don't worry about that. Just ask this Dom guy. It's all cool. It's not sweat on that. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, no, I don't have a midlife crisis every single time I'm on a show with Thorin about my whole career ending. Like, it's fine.
All you need to know is this. You know, people say you are the aggregate of the five people around you. Well, all I'm going to say is, you know my rep. Well, just from being around me, Dom can almost speak German now.
Yeah.
Existing live. Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll let it loose today. I mean, I just want to have a good time.
Right.
You know, I've always enjoyed this show, so I'm just gonna have a good time and you know, shoot some shots, I guess.
Here's the obvious thing we should do first, right? Okay, SeeEl, which is just like he obviously referenced previously before we started, right? Yeah. When in the past we've had Peter Dunn on when he was also defending BDS when they weren't that good. Obviously now with Heretics. Sorry, not with Heretics, obviously. And then now with this lineup, obviously, people are going to flame certain players and all that. So let's just get that all out the way first. Let's get the Heretics stuff out the way first. Let's get the slander / the battle / the war / the like us making use at like the Malcolm with Clockwork Orange, like look at him, look at him. Like let's just get that out the way, and then we can just have fun, can't we? Like you say, just gonna let loose. So go on, Dom. Okay, hit me with it.
It's time. Okay, so you know me. You've watched the show. I am an Evi hater. I am a public Evi hater. I am quote retweeting and hating on him. I am posting Twitters of I'm posting tweets of his entire match history, all of his deaths, flaming him. I'm calling out random deaths. I'm retweeting my friends that are calling him an animal. So like I am just a full Evi hater, and it's for multiple reasons. Number one, I'm just generally against imports that are not above the average level of the league. I don't think that they make any sense, especially for a team like Heretics. When you started the split, or when you started the year, I mean, you guys had 2 import slots, so ideally those import slots should be used for players that are better than the average level of the region. And by him occupying one of those spots, that means you can't make him upgrade somewhere else. So for example, when Mercer was struggling, I was saying like, oh, well, if you have Evi like on the team, that means you can't get an import replacement for Mercer or something like that. So I've generally been against imports, and I just think that he just seems unaware, and I don't see a trajectory of improvement that's possible, as well as the fact that he'll be able to massively change being somebody who's played League for 10 years competitively. So that's essentially my take on Evi. I flame him every stream. I flame him on this show every show. I had a show yesterday, Power Spike, on the same network. I flamed him there too. So what am I not seeing? What is wrong with me? Why do I just flame Evi all the time and he remains with a spot in the LEC?
I mean, you don't really have to answer the last part, but yeah, just give us your take on Evi.
I mean,
you wanted me to set it up. What the fuck you want out of me? Like, okay. Why have you not fired him? Why have you not fired him? Tell me. Like,
I mean, when you talk about like bad games, a lot of them are from the top side, right? Like Ebi had some horrific games, that's for sure. And I'm not. I mean, some of the things that he did on these official games were like for sure very questionable. I mean, you have to realize when we started off the split, especially like Ruby and Ebi and these guys,
That's some sort of emergency alarm or something.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I actually have to be right back. I'm really sorry.
All right. Well, here's the thing. We'll just talk while he's out there, right? Obviously, what happened there is.
I mean, that's probably the best response. This is the most reasonable thing I've heard from a coach about Evi so far.
Like Ebi just like pulled the fire alarm and he was like, you know what, I've got to get out of this shit. Like he's about to reveal all the horrific hints. I said, what is he doing? Well, he's done. I'll just say a joke because it doesn't matter if he's here for this. I actually saw Ebi do a tweet, and this is how you know I actually do feel slightly more bad for players when they're speaking in a second language and they come to a region and know they're getting flamed. Like I'll banter with some players on Twitter, but in general, if I don't know them, or that, like I say, it's more of a special circumstance, I don't want to be like too mean to them. So I didn't reply to him with this because I thought it's just too BM because he does follow me and it would just be a direct reply. But you probably saw that LEC did that stupid feature where they were like, make a team with $10, $1, $2, $3, and they put Yankos as $1, right? €1, sorry, right? And so Evi made the tweet where he said, tomorrow, €1 will beat €5. And he meant like the €1 jungler Yankos will beat like some of the €5 players because he said €1 will beat €5. I wanted to just say, mate, I'm pretty sure I already saw that last split. You know, just thought, one, he's not going to understand it. So the worst thing is he might even like it and go, oh, cool, he's interacting. And then two, what if someone explains it to him, just hurts his feelings? Like, spoiler, I'll give you a quick insight into what it's like to be me. Not only is there that story from years ago where someone really did like translate and tell like Coma, like, yeah, you know, there's a guy, a really big talk show that says you're ruining esports. Like, what? Like, not only has that happened, but I've heard in Eastern Europe, like when people don't understand the English, people just translate it to them and fuck up all my jokes and just think I'm not even joking and just say, oh, seriously, are you allowed to talk now?
Yeah, apologies. Apologies. Yeah.
Okay. I know it was probably like a
he forgot the question or something. You know, over there. Like,
everyone back down to the thing, quick.
Yeah. Okay. So to answer the question,
he's been dated by his PR people what to say now. So go on. What did they tell you to say?
You're talking about the beginning of the year with like Ruby and Evi when you signed them.
The US president earpiece in right now. Like
exactly. Heretics just called me and they were like, "Do not fuck up. Do not fuck this up." No, but honestly, like when we joined the project, like Peter and I joined with the idea that we're going to join a 2-year project. That's the idea, right? So we want to build a roster that can go to Worlds in 2024. So who are the best possible candidates that we can take in this spot? And we did interview a lot of top candidates. Like we tried to get Odo for one, right? Like personally, I took a pay cut to try to get Odo. That didn't work out because XL had the heist of a century in terms, like let's be honest, in terms of the off season at the beginning of the year. And we looked at Armut, we looked at a lot of different players. And you know what?
He's already suddenly winning you over. He was like, essentially, it was Sophie's choice. I had Armor or I had Evi.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck it. No point trying
It's
Armor.
like we have to choose between Evi and Hishinshin, and we care about children, so we decided to go with Evi. Like, it's like, all right, like,
keep going.
Continue. All right, continue.
I mean, of course, like we also looked at Wonder and a lot of the other options that were available. You know, what it came down to was a combination of budget and, you know, who do we think has the upside? Who do we think can show a good performance in the LEC, right, at this level? And if you remember who Evi is, he's a 10-time Japanese champion. That's the narrative around it. He performed well at Worlds. He actually performed good against Wonder at Worlds as well. But that being said, you know, I can't defend him in all of his plays recently, because that would just be, you know, false, right? That would just
Is there an angle
lie.
though? Like Dom says, what do we not know about this guy? Like, what's he like in team comms, or is he the one willing to have bad picks or something? What is the angle that you guys like about him?
I mean, for one, like personality, he's like a veteran that is able to just like fit into any kind of team culture and bring that on. And you know, Peter is a big like personality and team culture guy. So he's always thinking about that, and he's interviewed them personally, and he really liked the guy. Obviously, like, once again, we are disappointed in his performances. We're not going to come in and be like, you know, he's actually really great, but you know, that's not how it is. But what I will say is that some of the difficulties that we've been facing are, we had a certain idea on how we wanted to use this guy, and and then what ended up happening was the meta shifted, and the way that we had to play shifted as well, which included playing heavily toward the bot side. He wasn't traditionally like a great weak side player in Japan. He was the guy that would get 2,500 gold difference every 15 minutes. You know, he was the guy that would stomp lane. He was the guy that would shock haul in his teams. And that's just like not what we need right now in this team in terms of like our team identity, right? Especially with Marcin Jankos. He provides a lot of that leadership. And then we obviously had the issues with language barrier. So I would really say like 1 to 1.5 splits was really about like learning the language and like fitting into the team. And then now like spring and summer is more about, okay, how can we adapt this guy? And I'm not just going to blame Evi or like say that he's playing bad, because it's also part of our responsibility. I think that we had a lot of failures. Me personally, I made a lot of mistakes in spring that halted him from improving. So yeah, I mean, like you can shoot your shot at me as well, because I definitely like didn't help this guy.
Doing the grabs approach. I like it.
I mean, no, not really the grabs approach. I mean, as I said, I don't defend his play, right? But I do think that a lot of things that happened in spring and winter were not great, right? And it did hinder his ability to like grow as a player.
I have a quick question.
I took away something from that, Thorin, which is it's a 2-year project. We're gonna get content for a whole nother year.
Oh, what I love about that is that's actually why in some ways I do love Peter Dunn, because he is actually a man of integrity. Spoiler, people might have inferred that he wasn't himself maybe happy about what the Evil Geniuses stuff was last year. So all I'll say is this. Normally, the way you get the gig at an org with money is you come in and you go, I'll promise you the world. In fact, I'll promise you worlds, that you'll get to worlds. Maybe we'll be even in the split finals. We might win one of these motherfuckers. You know, we figure out. No, he just comes in, Dom, and he is so rational and reasonable. He's like, right, I need 2 years, and then we might be able to get top 4. Like all right. It's like, fair play to him. He's not selling you false expectations. And I will say, to be fair, if you look at the Heretics team with all lineups, dude, they have overperformed. They're not last place. They're not the teams fucking getting eliminated 1 to 9 or 1 to 8 or whatever. They actually do overperform, and they're always in a bunch of the games. So I do think Peter Dunn is a fucking stud coach. The one downside I have to him is, look, I know it's his strength, but I wish he was just on like a really elite team with all the best players, and I could see what he could do with that. I get that his strength is like making magic happen, like with fucking Ruby and some winning games, which does seem impossible. But yeah, it's whatever. No. It's whatever, isn't it?
No, I have a lot of respect for SeeEl and Peter Dunn, because I just watched Ruby play a full set of games, a full week in NA. And if you were able to win any games with that guy on your team, like you just must be the GOAT. You might be the best coach that I've ever seen. Yes. In my entire life. So mate, congratulations on that.
If you can actually make Ruby pop, you must be the best in the world at Bejeweled. Right. Anyway, so that's the sort of material you just get for free here. So yeah, not even canon material. Right. I do have one quick question though, which is, look, without ruining it for everyone, because maybe this is the quiet part I'm saying out loud. How does he just keep getting Cassandra all the time? Like, what's going on with that?
I mean, the narrative is pretty simple, right? I mean, I think that Ebby's aware of it, and you know, you'd be kind of blind and deaf to not realize. But people don't really respect Ebby as a player.
As in the other teams.
I mean, like at least in pick ban, you can
Yes.
see that, right? And so we get a lot of the champions that we want. That being said, I mean, this is something that maybe we might look into for the playoffs, right? So some of the most important things to do inside a team game is, like outside of solo queue, is balancing resources. And at the moment, what I can say is we have put Ebby in a position where, you know, he is really having to play alone. Like we're putting all our eggs in one basket. We just like bot lane and mid, we play through there. We play from mid into bot, and let's just see how it happens. And so, you know, perhaps even when we should be on top side with champions like Renekton, we're not, right? And this leads to, you know, enemy team possibly contesting us on Herald, or us misplaying around the map, or him having to 1v2 in many times where he shouldn't. And, you know, as a team, you know, once again, I'm gonna try and enjoy myself and speak directly here. We definitely did have a lot of like fraudulent wins, right?
Vitality.
I mean, there were a lot of games where, you know, at level 1 we were in a really, really bad position where we should just lose, or I mean, there were just so many things that we did that should have been punished a lot harder. That being said, at the same time, I think the entire league is just completely garbage. I mean, that's a topic that we can talk about later.
Well,
but
we will get to that, don't worry.
Yeah, with the narrative, like I mean, with the format and everything, I do think that the rest of the teams are also garbage.
Yeah, we'll
I mean,
sure.
relative, yeah, sure, we got a couple wins there, but I do think that aside from, you know, some of the poor performances, the way that we play also exacerbates, you know, Ebby's weaknesses, right? Or exacerbates Ebby's performances, which is not ideal. And I mean, the fact that this guy is able to that this guy, I'm trying to be like,
what you do, like 2 words at a time, so you can edit yourself in real time and go, I didn't mean to say that, I meant to say not, but like, so come on.
Yeah, okay. Fuck it. They were bad performances, right?
Yeah.
But the main thing is that he's still able to like bounce back from that, and he's the type of guy to come to us and say, hey, I'm having shit performances, I need to step it up. Like, what am I doing? He's the type of guy to be like watching over his VODs 5 times. He's the type of guy to actually say, you know what, I'll take one for the team. I'll play my Scion. You know, am I great at this champion? Is this my one trick? No, this is definitely not my strength. I mean, Ebby's strength is laning. If you watch the way that he played against Wonder, who I think is one of the Western GOATs, or one of the best top laners that this region has ever produced, he did incredibly well at Worlds. He won a best of 3 against Cloud9. He's the first Japanese player to make group stage at Worlds as well, right? So yeah, there's a lot of things that we really love about this guy, and that's kind of the reason that we stayed. Obviously, with
you
Ruby,
love his past, just not his present.
I mean, it would be a lie to say that we love his present right now, right? Yeah,
I mean, this is just gonna last too long, mate. It can't be a 10-minute answer to the end. We just like him and he did some good stuff. So we get it. We get it. So let me just take the ball from you now. I'm fucking Michael Jordan. Pass me the ball, motherfucker. And now I will set up something interesting to talk about. So one thing I will say is, it doesn't have to be total flame. Actually, this last week probably was the best week of fucking Ebby in the entire history of him in LEC. He had one pretty good game. Maybe the last week I'm trying to think. There was like one game where he had a bunch of kills, and then he almost actually was all right in the game that they fucking threw at the very end there. He had a couple of moments there that were actually some
the highest kills he had this season was 4 in a Renekton game. Like,
Freeze. Your attention is under arrest, because I want to tell you about thefreezepipe.com, one of our sponsors here on LFN and for the Best Damn League Show. Obviously, their products are a steal when you consider with our code LFN at the checkout, you get 10% off your order. Now, FreezePipe, if you're wondering what makes it different from your regular bong, dab, oil rig or bobbler, is they have the FreezePipe technology, which is the food safe glycerin chamber that you take, put into the freezer section for a mere hour, after which it will cool the smoke that you use through your bong bubble or whatever, meaning that you won't have that experience of like hot smoke irritating you, making your throat hurt, making the experience so you might enjoy the cannabis, but actually the experience itself is a bit painful, a bit annoying. Instead, it can just be pleasant, smooth, cool. Isn't that how we all want to be? Pleasant, smooth, cool. If only Thorin was more like that on shows instead of being so hot and irritated all the time. So if you want to support the show and you want want a great new bong, bobbler, dab, oil rig, maybe you want to try the twin turbine one with the 2 jets, etc., check out thefreezepipe.com and use the code LFN for 10% off your order. But here's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, he was.
I do think we should actually transition to what SeeEl's talking about there, which is we'll go into all the other teams next, but we'll just have a little break. We won't make it a fucking half an hour, but you did want to talk, SeeEl. You have a very different take to us because we talked on the past episode. Dom said that a bunch of players actually don't like this format. They don't like having the 3 weeks of the BO1s into the groups, into the playoff system. They actually like the old format of the BO1s that go like 8-9 weeks and then you have playoffs, etc. So I was actually surprised to hear you tell me privately, obviously this is why you're on the show, that you also agree it's actually not a good format. Like you don't like this first part and the way it's set up. So give me, what were the reasons why? What don't you like about this approach? I have to say as a viewer, I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the whole point of this format. It's just to like provide entertainment for the viewers to make sure that winter and spring count for something instead of spring and winter just being throwaway splits, right? But like to simply put, first, the breaks between shorts are really short. So like between winter and spring, we got COVID, right? At the very end of winter, when we're going into playoffs or when we're going to groups, we got COVID. And by the time we got COVID and finished groups and the next season had started, we were only just recovering from COVID. We were still like, we're only like 2 days after COVID because the breaks are only 2 weeks. So that means there's actually no time to relax and like reset mental. And then you have 3 scrim days a week. That's a huge problem. Before there used to be 4. So what's really happening is you went from 4 scrim days a week, being able to scrim from, let's just say 2 to 7, to 3 scrim days of high intensity, with regular season meaning so much more. And there is a difference, and I don't want to get too boring here, but there is a difference when you look at, coaching, when you look at high performance, between high performance mindset and high performance environment and an ideal practice environment. They're not synonymous. So for example, when you want to play a really good game on stage, this is a completely different mindset to being able to improve. So you're not getting enough time to really improve. And a lot of the other times, if you had like for 4 days, you could take an extra day off. For example, Mac is really well known to really like control his work time. So what would happen is he might even take like 1 day to review VODs as a team, and he might just do high intensity days 3 days a week.
Okay, he sometimes takes whole playoffs and international tournaments off.
Yeah,
keep going.
Yeah, but like, I mean, you can see his track record, and it's the same in like.
You're a fucking dick, Thorin. Jesus Christ.
I'm just gonna ignore that, man. But
man, okay, all right.
Yeah, but basically, like, you don't have time to do anything else. You have to like play like your life's on the line, and that means that the base caliber of players means so much more, which is why it's surprising to me that this Fatality roster imploded. I don't know what happened, how it happened, but when you have short splits like this, when every game counts, like look at us right now, we have to come top 3 just to make the championship, the top 6, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have a strong roster, you have way less time to improve. And so the entire narrative behind, it gives like all the underdogs a chance because the splits are shorter. Oh my God. I don't think it's entirely true. If anything, I think that you're even more reliant on top heavy teams. And then does that mean that the top teams are getting more practice? That's not true either. Because if you look at Korea, and I'm gonna like close off my point here, but if you look at Korea, one of the reasons that it make LPL and LCK strong is even the bottom teams can actually play a decent. I mean, I would say mid-tier teams can play a decent game. Sure. So when you look at like even Fred Bryan versus Genji the other day, Genji was 6-0 and Fred Bryan was 1-5, and they took the game to like 40 minutes and Seoul. And I think both sides could have won at any point. What happens now is it becomes even more top heavy. So who is G2 going to practice against? Who is Fnatic going to practice against now?
We're going to make a small enclave, I assume.
Yeah,
3-4 teams.
And once again, like if the players drop out, so say we come 8th, or in last case like spring we came 9th, we're not going to scrim. Like, I mean, we're going to try scrim, but we also need downtime, especially after going hard on the regular season, right? So who are they going to scrim? They're going to scrim ERL teams. They're going to scrim other teams that are trying to win, and they're going to scrim these teams that had less practice than any other region. So I think that this entire player format is great for the viewership, but definitely not good for improvement from like a scientific standpoint and from like a coach standpoint. And finally, I do think that when you look at like the mindset of players, it's just incredibly hard to maintain a process-oriented approach with this kind of process. So it's just very hard. Wins and losses just mean so much more.
I mean, I have a question there, which is what prevents teams from scrimming on the days where they have to go to the studio for a match? Because like I know in LPL they have to travel and they might do shorter scrim days, but they will do some practice on either official days. Because I mean, if you look at LPL right now, there's teams like WE, for example, that have to play 8 best of 3s in the next 16 days. Or yeah, they have 16 days, they're playing 8 best of 3s. So when you have like that amount of time, you're going to you're not going to have many days off, but you will use those days where you are playing official matches to at least get some practice. Is there like a issue with the mentality going into the games? Because I know in NA, a lot of teams are afraid to scrim on the day because they're like, oh, what if we have a bad scrim, then we go into the games tilted and we fucking underperform. So like, what is the issue with practicing on one of the days where you have a best of one?
I mean, we do warm up. The problem is if you do a full set scrim, there is a certain amount of time in the day that you can be focused. Like actually focus on the job that you do. And
let's say 3 games, for example, as opposed to 5 or 6.
Sure. But I mean, you do warm up like 1 or 2 games. But the thing is like 3 games and then traveling and then playing the studio. First of all, from a schedule perspective, it's really hard. So say you have a 6 p.m. game. No team is going to scrim in Europe before 1 p.m. That's just not going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And second, you just like, let's just say people do scrim at like 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. Then what about like the actual schedule and what about the actual practice regime after the game day, right? So the best you can do is warm up. But then if you're taking these warm up games as like proper scrim games, it's obviously not ideal to like play on stage if there's a big happening as well, right? Because you're really like, you're going to get into arguments, you're going to talk about review and a lot of stuff. So like Peter does his best to kind of organize a schedule where we can have decent scrim partners, where we can like warm up against them, get decent practice, but not get too involved. But yeah, I mean, like no teams will scrim us. And then, there's also human rights, right? Like when I talked to Malrang for the first time, it's like funny.
I know where you're going. This is about to be so mental, but go on.
Yeah,
human rights involved in the play our games of league. Go on.
I'm not like a fucking justice warrior on Twitter or anything, right? But I'm just saying, when I first came to Rogue, and Malrang was talking to me about their scrim schedule in Dam 1, Korea is literally scrimming 3 scrim blocks, 9 to I don't know what it was. I think it was like 1 to 4, 6 to 9, and then like 10 to 1 a.m. Then they play solo queue till 4.
Solo queue. Yep.
I mean, like you just don't have that here. You can't have that here. If you do that, our fucking GM will go to jail. Like
you probably wouldn't be allowed under German labor laws.
I mean, not only are we not allowed to do that, right? You just can't take the same approach as the East.
You'll burn people out.
So the truth is, I think that this entire format is trash for improvement. But I also think that like we're trying to take shortcuts, right? They're trying to think of ways to make Europe more competitive. They've shot themselves in the foot. How do we make Europe more competitive? Well, we play more best of 3s. We just need to have longer game days. We just need to have more game days. Yeah. And if you have, let's just say 2 best of 3s a week, you can still take the other days off, right? So, you just have to not take a shortcut. You just have to be better. Like, you just have to practice in a more high-performance environment.
Yeah, we get the premise. Right, Dom, what's your response to that? Then I've got a few thoughts.
Well, I just think it's going to be really tough to ever, like, catch these other regions if this is, like, what you're willing to do, right? Like, if you can only play 1 or 2 days of scrims and then you're playing 3 days, 3 best of 1s a week, then it's tough. I mean, I feel like there's going to be a lot of wasted time in my experience on those days from competing, because I played best of 1s my entire career. Well, not my entire career in the LCS. I played a lot of best of 1s, and the thing about that was that, those days just end up being so long because you have to travel to the studio, you do makeup, you get there, and then afterwards, like, you have to travel back and you have to do fan meet and all this type of stuff. So yeah, I don't really know like what the solution is, but I think there's one thing that was mentioned, which is that it's great for viewership, which I am not completely sold on it being better for viewership. Like, I don't think there's indication. Like, so the first split, there was really good viewership in winter, like when there was a novelty factor of, there's a new format and like, this is so hype, look at the split going. But now I'm not sure, like in summer, there was the fall off like of viewership, which happens every year. But I think it's like proportional to what the fall off was before. I don't know if we're getting more viewers now than we were last year around the same time in LEC. And I think that it almost burns viewers out having to watch like, oh, this is like a really high tournament, like this is the finals, and then 1 week break, and then you're like, oh, you're back in like best of ones, and this is also really hype because teams are getting eliminated, and it feels like there's no like cool down time for viewership where the viewers like don't feel like they need to watch it. It's like, if you want to watch all of LEC, you pretty much, or like if you want to be like there for all the hype moments, now you have to just continually watch LEC for the whole years. And I feel like some viewers don't vibe with that like really hard. So I'm not sure if it's actually like long term going to be a good thing for viewership when it becomes less novel and it becomes an every year thing.
Right, what I would say is this. I'll start off with the whole thing. I've told this anecdote before, but I don't think I've told it on this show, so I'll tell it very briefly. I went to China in 2009 for the first time for like a CS event way back in the day. And when I went there, I went to, I think it was at Hangzhou. And when I went to this city, which at the time was like a developing city, I'd had like loads of money pumped in it, but it wasn't like it wasn't like Shanghai or Beijing or these amazing ones you go to with the skyscraper. It was way more of sort of like a backwater type of place that we're just trying to industrialize, etc. When I went there, I remember walking down the actual high street with all like the proper roads and all the big shops. And I saw two guys fixing like a telephone wire or something. And here's how they were fixing it. One of them was just stood, and then he had a ladder, the feet of the ladder on his shoulders, leading up with another man on top of the ladder fixing the telephone pole. And what I realized in that moment was that the West will never ever be able to beat China for like basic concepts like workmanship and things, because like in my country, for example, SeeEl, that would be completely illegal. Like you'd have to have like a special like two people hold the ladder, one's from like a union. You have to have like a license to fucking have someone put the ladder up. Obviously that'd be like health and safety concerns. Like there'd be a million things that like you'd get invited. But over there, someone just did it with two guys. They just fixed it in a mega unhealthy and unsafe way. And so that already made me realize way before I came to the League of Legends, like, oh, it's awful. Like I knew the Koreans were good at StarCraft, but it's awful. Like they've got more people and they can do that shit. Like, yeah, like essentially it's like the old joke, isn't it? Like, how would you build something crazy like a pyramid? It's like, well, the joke is if you can just throw unlimited human slave labor at a project, you can do a lot of things that you can't really do with like, again, union and employees. So I'm with you on that one. And essentially I will frame this whole conversation as I'm going to talk more about the abstract, idealized ways you could fix things, as opposed to you're coming from a very practical scenario of what you could do these weeks and next week, and what happens if week one doesn't go so well, and then in week two, do I try to actually improve my macro, or do I just like figure out the picks that can get us one game win that maybe we need to get in the playoffs? I get the considerations, and if people don't know, one thing I've always been against in Western orgs is this stupid approach where people who are coaches have short-term contracts too, just like players, and you can get fired after one split. Sometimes you can get fired mid-split. I've always thought if you actually want people to improve and have a process and a system, give them like 2 years, commit to them, stick with their ideas. Like the whole point is, yes, you'd have to vet them even harder before you commit, but it would pay dividends. It would allow people, like you're saying, to have weeks where you experiment, but the team's still going to be in groups, but maybe we're not at the top, or you could do some of the things you're talking about. But then I'll go quickly to some of the other things. One is on the whole thing of like but like you only have a few weeks and it can go really wrong in 3 weeks. Like you guys have never seen the open circuit. You ever seen CSGO or Dota 2? Like the tournament is 5 days long. Like you're out on day 2. Like, oh, sorry, did that not go well? Fly back over the other side of the world, fuck off. And by the way, while the other teams are still at the tournament, no one to scrim against unless you scrim against tier 2, the equivalent of the LFL, etc. So that's already just reality in a really competitive meritocratic system like the open circuit. So I don't have too much sympathy in that regard. Then I'll throw this in as well. When you're like, we only have 3 scrim days. Some of those tournaments, you just go in CSGO, like one tournament. If you have 2 tournaments in America, you just go from one to the other. Like you can't even scrim because you're in a hotel. Maybe the other team's out there. Maybe you get like PCs and you have 1 to 2 scrim days with the odd team. It's not quality practice. Then on that whole thing you said there, you just gave away so much of the game, mate. Half the problem's mentality. As you just said, and this is absolutely true, I've heard this story a million times. The reason why you wouldn't, Dom, want to play a proper competitive scrim on the play day is there are dickhead divas in Europe still who will have a bad game 3 and then fucking like go silent in the draft or fucking in the next game or not play proper. Like there are actually pro players getting paid $10,000 who'll do that.
There was an 80 carry that didn't hit the Nexus and he tilted so hard he roll swapped in LEC. Like it's just crazy what happened.
This one, I heard from my immaculate sources, he only roll swapped after already being benched by that team. But you know what? As you might find in an interview today and tomorrow, he's a serial liar publicly and privately. But whatever, check out my YouTube channel if you want to know more. So then the other thing
I'm waiting for that video. I
Oh,
have a book
they already-
an hour and 15 minutes. Like I'm going to. That is my next thing. Like so, when this show ends, I go. I put it downstairs on my TV and I watch the reflections.
What I'll say is this: some of the best Reckless stuff is in part 2, which is tomorrow. But it's okay, it's still tomorrow. Some of that's a tease. But all you need to know is this: you'll know the reference here. You know the infamous Kanye interview with Zane Lowe, where he's like, "We're the new rock stars, and I'm the biggest of them all." That's basically what this interview is. Just get ready. The amount of quotables he drops, the people he calls shitters, losers, or especially when you get to the end of part 2 bit. No one can do it like me. No one's got. I'm like Colonel Sanders. No one's got the 17 flavors or whatever you have to put in there. The finger like it's too delicious. So anyway, back to this shit because spoiler, that guy's the twat as well. So here's the thing we need to get into finally here, which is when you say that thing about like and then you already have like these many days, and then you go into the next phase. It's like, bro, let's just go back to what I said at the beginning of the episode. After the 3 weeks, which you already have to survive, by the way, there's no concept that after those 3 weeks, you have to be ready to play Worlds. In fact, in winter, you've got loads ahead of you. You've got 2 more splits, the championship thing, you've got the groups of each split, you've got the playoffs of each. If you get there, you've got loads of chances to change, improve. Between each of the fucking sections, you get time off. You get like a week off. You get a week to practice. To me, that's mental. It's like, mate, that's when you improve. Spoiler, here's what you're talking about. If you have a bad team, you're going to have a fucking really hard time becoming number 1 in like 9 weeks. I don't think you should be number 1. In this scenario, you started with fuck all, survived the first 3 weeks, then you got a week to improve stuff, work on shit, get it better. As you're saying, your actual argument at the end was like, essentially, teams with the best players are going to win. And I'm like, oh God, no, please say it ain't so. That ain't such a big deal to me. And then I'll just say this finally, which is the actual thing that I think you're missing in the bigger picture is this. The reason why the 3 split solves what you're talking about instead of making it worse is because actually, like you say, you can completely fuck winter up, but get it sorted together in spring and then have a strong summer, as Fnatic might be about to do. This is literally what they're doing right now. And you can already make Worlds, but you get it all back. Yeah, you didn't win those split titles, but you actually get it all back. Whereas I remember the old format, I thought it was death, mate. First of all, every team I know was still living, despite what you said, in the world of like, you just got to win these 2 games this week. Everyone was living in that world still. They weren't properly improving the
Maybe not Rogue. I mean, he was on Rogue. They were always like fucking 11-1 in like week 5.
But everyone else was just doing that thing of like, you just do a band-aid fix that gets you a win now and hope you can sort of work one more pick into the equation and gradually improve. And then also, I thought that the actual lack of punishment during the split made those splits terrible. Remember last year, Dom, when we would be talking about like XL's one of the best teams in the league, but that was like the first 4 to 5 weeks. Then they gradually drop off week by week by week. And at the end in the playoffs, they're not even relevant. It's like, you just think like, what the fuck was this tease for? There's nothing there at the end. This is garbage. I've just been catfished on fucking Tinder by these twats. And so then you're like, meanwhile, you'd have the other teams, and I hate this, by the way, SeeEl, even though I'll give massive props to people like Expect here, who could fuck around, literally go out drinking, come in, just go, who gives a shit, it's a regular season, but get to playoffs and then go, right, time to play, and then win the split. In a way, that's cool in a movie. As an actual professional, that's garbage. The greatest players of all time are the guys who turn up every day and perform and are great players and put in the hours. So to me, I hated the fact that also great teams like that Fnatic lineup last year could be utter morons for a whole summer split while Humanoid's getting paid more money than God. But as long as he turns up in the playoffs, it's all forgiven. I think that's terrible for fucking competitive play. I think it's terrible for improving. So I take all your points on board. I'm sure from your perspective, there's a lot of validity there. I can see why you would want these things. By the way, as we said earlier, I'm a viewer. I don't have to want the same things you do. I don't even have to care if your team does well. So I take a lot of these points on board. I do think it's a really complex topic, basically.
I mean, I do want to say that I actually agree with all the points that you said. I actually agree with all the points that you said. And
good stuff.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing is, I thought that last year's format was garbage too, and a change was needed.
What would you prefer then? Because you said you want player free.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I watched CS:GO as well. I mean, that's how I knew your content. I actually played CS:GO before I played League, and you know, something that's great about CS:GO, aside from the broadcast, is the international tournaments and how the circuit is constantly moving, and there are major tournaments after major tournaments. And you really need to go to these tournaments in order to like maintain viewership and to like maintain sponsors or whatever, right? And to have good practice. In League of Legends, there's 2 international tournaments a year. One of them is pretty much irrelevant. I don't know anyone that actually cares about MSI nowadays. And then one is obviously
pretty good, but the old one I agree. Yeah, the old
I
one.
think this one was a
I mean,
monster
let me throw you a curveball here. You know what I miss? I miss All Stars when we had NA versus E All Stars and we picked like top players. I miss having was it Cologne where we had IEM was I think it was IEM Katowice. I miss IEM. I miss multiple international tournaments where these things actually mattered, where you had a much more heavier circuit in terms of actual competition. I'm not saying I'd love that as a lifestyle, but if I think of it as a competitor, for sure. And then you know, so now you're stuck in a caveat where you build up a strong team, you don't have a diva mentality, you go into your best of ones, and every game matters and whatever, and it's great for the viewership. And then you win, and then there's nobody left to scrim. Why? Because there's 10 other teams that don't want to scrim you. There's no international team traveling to your region. There's just no competition, mate.
LFL and LVP teams not good enough to scrim. Are they not good enough?
Of course not.
Right.
Of course not. I mean, like if you look at the win rate, I mean, even us, when we're trying hard on a day, like, and we're working hard, we're not going to lose. And like to give you context, when I was in Rogue, and we were in the summer finals, we were a third place team in regular season. We scrimmed the Heretics Academy team, who won EU Masters, by the way, and we ended every game in 8 minutes. We played 5 games, and every game was like 6 to 8 minutes. Actually, we ended up playing like 6 or 7. I mean,
that's why you benched their 80 carry from your team this split. Perfect. Now we understand.
Shut up, Dom.
Okay.
Jack is actually fine, but
that's my boy. He's always in the nuts. I just flame him perma. I don't know what's wrong with me.
What you said on Twitter when he said something nice about you, and then you said Flack had ended his career. That was so brutal. I don't know why you would do that to him, man.
It's just Jack is just such an easy target. You know, like he sets you up for it.
It's
perfectly.
No different. I went to the LEC studio and I said, IWillDominate, how you going, mate? We shake hands. We're like, how are you? How scrims? And he's like, oh my God, that's a fucking terrible bowl cut.
Right, I love Odo. There you go.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: he plays weak side in the game, plays strong side in real life.
Yeah, he does. He really does. And so yeah, I mean that's my curveball. I mean, I do agree with all the other things, but like here's another thing. I mean personally, I don't know what the fucking
By the way, I will just say I do agree with you. If I could change one thing, it would be that everything would be at least BO3. Because the other thing about BO3s I learned from LPL and LCK is you use the BO3 to test shit out. Like if anyone doesn't watch the LPL, it's not really that like JDG can't like win 2-0 against the worst teams. They obviously experiment when they're up 1-0 in a best of 3 against the worst team. They just in game 2 you try a weird draft, you try a pick you don't normally do, you try some other thing. So I do agree the BO3s. BO3s can fix everything.
If you're in a BO1 and you win a game, it doesn't matter. It doesn't like show that you're a good team. But if you lose, like if you win somebody in a BO3, you're probably the better team.
Sure.
Like that's the case. So I do think that it's really important.
I think it's just an exhausting discussion though. Like because when you talk about all these things, it's like there's always just a reason why NA and EU teams don't have to work as hard as other teams. There's always a reason. Like so people don't want to scrim before, like during MSI, people don't want to scrim, or like before MSI, the teams that are eliminated don't want to scrim a lot of the time because they're like, oh, it's going to be a new patch. There's going to be like a mid-season patch and everything, and the whole game's going to change. So there's no point enough scrimming now because apparently, like, even though the same concepts have existed, like Baron setups, like whether you turn, finish, whatever, because there's going to be slight differences in the game, suddenly you get nothing out of scrimming. So you don't want to scrim then. Before the season starts, oh, there's going to be a huge season. Like, who knows what's going to be OP on that patch? So there's no reason to scrim then. Then it's like you don't want to scrim on the day that you're competing because you don't want to get tilted. Then there's issues with like, oh, and like you don't want to scrim with like a player that you might not be playing with the next split. So you don't want to scrim. Like, there's just always a reason not to scrim, and it's super exhausting for me. Also, like,
you know when they say all those players like, well, I needed a break after the split. It's like, bro, have you ever worked a real job? You don't just get to take 2 weeks break out every fucking 3 months, mate. What are you talking about? Like in the UK, there are jobs where you get 2 weeks off in the whole year.
I mean,
I don't know. Like it's
really, isn't it?
It's
super weird. And then also, I'm not like, I don't have much sympathy for like players that are like, oh, we're working too hard, because I mean, I came from original esports where you actually competed because you wanted to do it, and it was like you were so privileged to be competing in a video game and be making money from a video game that it didn't matter if you were having to do double the time, because at the end of the day you're playing a fucking game.
Dream.
It was the dream. So like it didn't matter when I was a competitor. We played a tournament, MLG Raleigh, And this is the tournament that we had that infamous ARAM where we ARAM'd the finals. And the ARAM of the finals was actually a protest. The reason why we did it is because it was a fuck you to the tournament.
So there was an ARAM that was involved in a protest in North American League of Legends. Well, that probably never happened again. So.
Yeah, that was we were the original ARAM in a protest. We actually knew how a protest worked, and we stood on our shit and fucking took a massive fine. We lost money for that shit, which these players who get paid. Think about this. Our 10 players sacrificed $32,000. $32,000 amongst our 10 players. These players that are making millions won't sacrifice fucking $32,000. So the reason we protested is because the day before we had a schedule where we finished at midnight and the next day we were competing at 8 a.m.
There you go.
And we had to play, the reason the format was so stupid was we had to play multiple best of threes against the same team, and there was a bracket reset. So we played the team that was Monomaniac Esports that became TD. They were the team that became Coast in the LCS. We played the core of that team, which was like Zion, Spartan, Darshan at that time. We had to play them in a best of 3. We beat them in a best of 3. Then we had to play them. They were in the losers bracket, so we played the losers bracket, and we were up 1-0 in the series, right? Because we're in the winners bracket. Then they beat us from the losers bracket in another best of 3, and all these best of 3s went to 3 games. And we had to play a best of 3 earlier that day. And then we had to play them a third time in a best of 3 because the bracket reset. So we played 9 games against the same team in one day. And we finished at midnight or like 1 a.m. And we had to start the next day at 8 a.m. to play the rest of the tournament. So we were doing a protest that, but it's like no one was complaining about this is against our human rights. We had to play 11 games in a day. Like people would lose their fucking minds if they had to play 11 games in a day these days. So like we got paid no money. We had to travel. This was on a Tuesday, by the way. We had to play regionals, which was the qualification for Worlds, on a Friday. We had to fly home, and it's not like our orgs were putting us up in a hotel. On Tuesday, we had to finish the tournament, fly home. Then on Thursday, we fly out to Seattle. Then we have to fucking compete in another fucking tournament that weekend. And that's like, and we're getting, like, if we won both tournaments, number one, we got, not only did we lose all the money from the first tournament, we also got fines. So we actually lost money for going there. If we get top 2 in the tournament, we get like $6,000. And this is like an insane amount of just games played. This is so much work. And now I hear like these players just being like, oh yeah, we need like this break and that break, and there's no use scrimming. Oh, and we got eliminated, so we're probably gonna take some time off. And I'm sure Vitality's not gonna do shit, right? Like Vitality, we don't even know if we're gonna be playing in the season finals, so they're probably not gonna scrim. It just makes me feel like it puts me on my fucking boomer high horse where I'm like, kids these days don't know how fucking good they have it. Like they didn't exist in like old esports where you actually did it because you loved the game. Like you wanted to play the game because it meant you didn't have to go to fucking college. It's like, bro, I can not go to college, get paid like good money, and I get to play video games. It's a fucking dream. So that's my rant.
Like basically, we're modern day LEC players watching that Queen's Gambit show. Like, oh, it's a bit messed up. She's up all night taking drugs and that. She should really get a work-life balance in order. She should get 8 hours sleep, love. Like, you know, it's only a chess match. You know, what about your human rights? They were just like, the point is, it's the dream, like Dom says. I'll just say this, by the way. The other reason no one ever mentions why we'll never be able to catch or beat the Asians, aside from the fact China has literally more people, so already good luck beating that, is this. In those countries, SeeEl knows this from I'm sure his background with his own family, is they are allowed, not only do they have the cultural work ethic, and that comes also from how incredibly harsh they are inside families. Like, because it's all about like the Confucian like face and shame of your honor and your name. Your own mother, this is real. If you're a girl, you know, in the West, it's all Twitter. Like, let's normalize not judging like, you know, Eurocentric body standards of fat shaming and that. Like, in an actual like Korean family, if the girl comes home and she's like 10 pounds overweight, the mom's like, you are fat. You will never get man. You are ashamed to us. Like, that's just what they're like. And so there's also the sort of thing, like, that's like in theory, what drives you is you want to be the best, you want to have work ethic. But what also is the fire behind your ass and the whip is your parents will be like, look, you're going to make a fucking fool of us. Like, you better do your best. If you're going to do this, you better go all in. Whereas, as Dom said, it's more like people go like, I want to go this much in, but then not that much, and then in and then out, but then having a good time. Oh, but it's not so good now. So it's like, I just essentially, say he said, it's a whole other topic. The Best Damn League show period is brought to you in association with eSportsBet, the industry's leading crypto odds matrix. They still have their classic first-time deposit bonus if you've never put crypto on the site before of 50% on up to 100 USDT. Let's talk about some teams in LEC, mate. Fuck it, let's talk about the LEC.
Sure.
So one thing I do want to talk about is let's do it. Let's do the Vitality discussion because, as we said, they won't be being talked about for the rest of this split, but they might. In fact, if you look at it, I noticed Dom was the only one who could do this because in the modern day,
yeah, no one can do math.
Is a knuckle-dragging cretin who can't even understand concepts. Like, they still keep repeating, by the way, that the number of scenarios, that graphic, is the probability that you get through. One, do you really think Riot, who can't seed whether Cloud9 is better than T1, are actually telling you on a graphic that they've run a computer model predicting who can make it through and their chances? No. What they've done is show you the number of possible worlds, like the fucking Doctor Strange scenario, in which you get through. So actually, when it's like 96%, it's like, that's not at all, you cretin. In fact, in some of those games, logically on paper, Vitality was way better than like a 6% chance to win them, you moron. Think about it. But as Dom pointed out, they can't, they did this last split as well, they can't do the basic championship point calculation. They just go like, it's actually impossible for Vitality to make it because, and then you look, and
chance.
It's actually like mad likely they will. Like, if you look at who has to finish above and who's not likely to, there's actually a pretty solid chance they will make it. So obviously, let's get the Vitality thing out the way now, since we won't be talking about them until the championship finals if they make it. So, right, Dom, I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. Even though I will just point this out, without going into why, you'll see in the rest of the video, because obviously I'm protecting the guest here. This is a fact, a provable fact. Over a large sample size, I consistently win betting on esports, both League of Legends and CSGO. It's a fact. I can prove it to you. But with that said, what betting taught me about life is this. I am very shrewd when I bet, and I wait for the right odds and I wait for the right spots before I bet. On these shows, we're just presenting opinions, and some of them you throw out there. Some of them is what you want to happen. It's idealized. It's trying to think like, well, no one else is going for this angle, so if I pick it, then if it works out, I get all the credit. Like me and Dom say about the buying into perks at the low stock, you know, in case he spikes next year, and we can say we told you so. So I will say some of my opinions have been so goated trash, it is almost impossible to be worse. Like, for example, if you thought it was bad in 2015, where I famously said that Fnatic lost the offseason, that team won the 2 splits and went top 4 worlds. And I also said Roccat won the offseason, they never even made playoffs. But it's even worse than that. I actually, this year, for winter split CL, I had Excel as my number 1 team, last place. For this split, I had Vitality as my number 1 team, last place. But that just shows you, it's like the famous saying they say, opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got them, and they all stink. Not that I've checked it out. I haven't actually verified if that's facts or not. I believe it's just a statement out there. So let's start with Vitality. Come on, Dom. Give me the Vitality. I'm ready now. I've been in denial for a long time, Dom. I've hit rock bottom. You have to understand. They were 3rd place last split, Dom. I finally hit rock bottom. I know I've got a problem. So come on, bring me through this.
I'll tell you when I knew it was over for Vitality. On the 2nd day of week 2, after Vitality lost, and they were 1-4. Thorin tweeted out, well, if Vitality can just make groups that can buy them so much time. As soon as I saw that tweet, I was like, it's fucking over. They're going 1-8.
Exactly, I know. It's like,
I'm like, he's coping so hard. it was impossible for me to do that shit. So when I saw that, I'm like, it's fucking over for Vitality. Just write them off. I mean, they just looked so broken. Just the way that they were throwing every single game. I mean, like the fucking Nocturne game. Wait, who was the Nocturne game first? I don't even remember. Oh, I think it was Astralis, bro. I don't even remember who they're playing against. I just remember them throwing, like the Heretics game. Somebody had to remind me of that. It's just like, I remember the throw bot. I remember the throw top lane. I remember Bo running it down on Maokai. And
even
the team obviously
at the very end blew that one too.
Yeah, they blew the game versus BDS that actually mattered. I mean, they throw every single game. And I think the most damning part is that Douglas came in and played well. Like, I thought Douglas played pretty well. Like, he didn't play perfectly, but he played good enough where the players were actually advertised, and it was Bo's fault they would have won. But this shows that it's like, yeah, there's a problem with all the players. And then also, like, Perks just hasn't looked good the whole split. He's just looked so bad the entire split. And I don't know. It's very hard to watch a player like that.
That's not accurate. He's never been good. He was always a fraud. And in fact, even when he was like winning tournaments and in like MSI finals and worlds, he was actually this bad then, and you just wouldn't admit it. Dom, what? Yeah. Will you fucking be
just admit you were wrong, Thorin.
Exactly.
Why don't you just admit you're wrong?
Admit you were wrong about every championship Perks ever won. He was never the GOAT. He was always worse than like fucking Larson. There you go.
That's my favorite. Admit you were wrong. It's like like when I admit I'm wrong, I'll say it like in passing. I'm like, yeah, I was wrong about that. But they like want you to be like,
Dude, my favorite.
I'm such a fucking idiot, man. I'm so stupid. Like they want you like some like I apologize. I'm so fucking sorry for what I did. Like they want some crazy like meltdown.
My favorite ones when they go one nut chop and they go, say sorry, apologize, and admit you lied. And it's like, no, that's accurate. What? Like it was just an opinion. Like holy shit. Like anyway, yeah, whatever. Go on.
Yeah,
go on.
It's just the problem with Vitality is they're so much worse than the sum of their parts, and like now and it started with like, oh, that's a throw, but they played well for most of the game, and then now it's gotten to the point where it's like, do they all suck? Like, do you all just fucking suck now? Like, what is this? And I hate watching a team like Vitality collapse, because one thing that I was saying, and one thing that I really appreciate about LPL is that the bottom teams still like they have some pride. They have some pride for like themselves as players and their job. Like they're being paid to perform. So you go out there and you perform even if things are going tough. But it felt like Vitality, they just gave the fuck up. Like that last game versus XL, they're like, yeah, whatever. I mean, we're already 10th place anyway. Like we can't get 9th even. So it doesn't matter. It's play Germany,
so I guess pride's over. Keep going.
Okay. All right. Anyways, I'm not going to touch that one. So
all right, all good.
So they just run it down. It's like, even like when you watch today, like TT versus EDG, I was watching it with Gilius and I was like, and I told him, I'm like, I think TT is going to come out and compete, even though they're pretty much eliminated. They're 2-9. They come out, they compete, and then you see like when they win the series. It's a hard-fought 3-game series. Gilly said that they were mass murderers. There was like 130 kills in like a 3-game series. He's like, you have to be like a serial killer to win a fucking game in LPL. They finish and like Yukal's like jumping up. He's doing the gorilla. He's beating on his chest. He's like hugging his jungler. He's fucking pouring out champagne. He like got a girl from the stands, like made out with her. Like he was doing crazy shit. Like,
celebration. Yeah.
Yeah. He had a fucking insane celebration. It's like they still like care. They show some passion. And it's like you look at Vitality and they just look like beaten dogs. They look like so like they like don't want to make eye contact or they're like, oh, get the camera off me. Like I don't want you to see me. Like where's the pride? Like go out there and fucking show that you're not dog shit. Like you're 10th place with this roster. And it's like they just don't have any fire left in them. So I don't feel bad flaming them because it's like you don't even care about yourselves. Like why should I care about you guys as a team?
Well, nothing you say now, SeeEl, could be worse than what Dom just said. So what do you think about Vitality?
Oh boy.
By the way, the thing I would like to ask initially is this. Is it true that actually before this split in scrims, they were really good and people did think they were good?
They were good. I mean, like, look at their players. Like, for example, I think if Bo went to a Chinese-speaking team right now and he hadn't had that whole fiasco, do you really think that he'd be bad? I mean, it's a bit absurd to even say, no? Like his performance,
it's implied, right, that they just lost faith in him and forced him on Palpy and Maokai, right?
I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about, but I mean, the main thing for me is this: the sum of all parts does not actually always equal the sum of all parts. I mean, certain pieces need to go well together. Certain pieces need certain other pieces. For example, Upset may need a jungler that can be bot. Right? Quite often they're not. And if you have a carry jungler, there's only so much resources inside the game. So how much can Perk sacrifice? How much does that fit inside the meta? And so when you actually look at, I mean, the whole narrative behind super teams don't work is actually like really, I think.
JDG is just doing terrible. I'm telling you.
JDG is doing terrible. T1's done really terrible. Bad. 2014, Samsung's done terrible. There's some, and G2 has done terrible in 2019, 2020. The truth is, and something that I learned as a coach, and after this, I kind of told myself, what the fuck do I know about coaching? From Peter Dunn was, you need to find the right pieces inside a team, and these pieces need certain things. And it might sound like common sense, but it's actually not an easy task. I mean, the off-season is probably one of the most difficult things to do. So really, when they constructed this team, and they brought in Upset, why do they look worse than when they had Neon? The question, I mean, the answer is very simple, right? It's that they need a different type of jungler, and they might need a different type of playstyle. But if it goes this late into the season, then there's a lot of other factors involved, including losing confidence, including like getting frustrated. So, I mean, I think this Vitality roster was probably some sort of like an implosion. But I really hope to see like some top like carry jungles being played, and maybe Upset showing a different side of his gameplay, because he is traditionally like a strong side player, which is a good thing, right? So yeah, I mean that's my opinion of Vitality. But at the same time, I want to touch on the culture thing. When you talk about European culture, I mean absolutely. When you look at the Asians, like you work 20 hours a day, it's not enough, right? And I'm not saying that's healthy, and I'm not saying that I'm agreeing. I can't agree with it either, because obviously, like, if I were, I'd be a fraud as a coach, right? Because I mean, I have to think about people's mentalities and all of this stuff. But I think we are at a stage where a lot of the Western leagues are suffering from like a lack in competitive mindset and a lack in passion. People just do it for the money now because there is so much money. And the difference between Europe and China, for example, is in Europe. I mean, we talked about swapping rosters between spring and summer and all this stuff, right? You can't actually fire someone like that anymore. It doesn't work like that. A lot of these players have non-bench rates, which means that if you pay a player $50,000, whatever happens, even if you bench them, that budget is now gone.
As far as I know, from what I was told, this is why they've never considered actually getting rid of Humanoid from Fnatic. Like, his contract's enormous, and you just may as well play him with. I mean, pay it anyway, you know.
So why do you think Selfmade is not playing in LEC right now? Like, part of the reason he didn't pursue anything is because when you have a contract like that, it's better to sit on the bench and take the money from your contract. And some people like do get like their rates cut. But if you're getting 50% cut to literally do nothing, like you get hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, as opposed to like, you know, let's say hypothetically, this is not pertaining to Selfmade. Let's say hypothetically you're making $500K a year, and then you get benched and you're still making $250K to do nothing for an entire year. Like, everyone's going to take that. Here's
the irony, right? Of course, that's a problem in Europe because there are human rights and labor laws. But what the fuck is wrong with North America? If you literally if they want to fire you in North America, the day after, you've lost your job and you don't get paid anymore. That's how it works. At max, you pay, I think, like a 3-month severance. And for like a 2-year contract, it's nothing. If you do it in Europe, you get sued. Right? So what is the problem? It comes down to culture. So I mean, I agree with you there as well, Thorin. I mean, do I think that it's sustainable the way that the East does it? No, but they have so many people, they probably just don't care.
They can burn people out. It's like Korea just chucks you away if you're not good against the next guy.
But how can the West win? For me, like the way the West wins is we develop an infrastructure like we did in traditional sports. Like, there's a reason Europeans are bloody good at football. Like the infrastructure that they've set up. I mean, esports is so far away, especially around like mental health and people on the spectrum. There's a lot of people on the spectrum in esports and caring for these people. Yep. I mean, it's so incredibly important. For example, I mean, we had a tragedy happened in esports recently, which was very, very sad. But in traditional sports, you have sports psychologists working 24/7 to ensure that doesn't happen anymore, because it has happened before. And so these are the things that we need to catch up on. And I mean, when you look at a great example is Korean baseball. Korea used to be a baseball powerhouse in like the 80s and 90s. We actually got pretty good at baseball. But then what ended up happening was we just fell further and further behind like NA, right? And that is because of these like longer term views. And the truth is, ageism is bullshit. Like, if IWillDominate wants to play until he's 35, he probably could. He has the mentality for it. Yeah. I mean, it's like max 2 years. But a bad example. But the point is, if he really wants to play until he's 35, he can. Just it comes down to what kind of support network do we have? Do we allow him to have a personal life as well as a professional life? And how can we optimize it? That's the problem, right? The problem is that people are not competitive. Their mindset is wrong. The culture is wrong. Not the actual fact that, you know, they may practice 4 days a week. How hungry are they, right? And to give you an example, like, I know so many players that took a pay cut, even though they could just sit on their contracts. Right. And these players, I mean, I won't mention their names and coaches too. Yeah. These are the guys that end up still being top performers. And I mean, to give you an example, right? I wanted to build, I mean, this is back in Vitality days. I wanted to build something long term. I mean, I always looked up to, you know, Ferguson when I was coaching. So I wanted to build something long term. So what I told Vitality when I was in the academy roster was, I told them, re-sign me for 2 years, 40K. And they didn't re-sign me. I mean, they took 2 months or 3 months, and then I went to free agency and I got quadruple my salary, right? And that's really the problem with esports. I mean, I still love the structure, but when you look at like long-term approach, there's so much to be developed. And I don't just want to flame the fact that we don't practice enough days or enough hours, because that's not what it is. It's an obsession. It's how focused you are. It's how detailed you are. And in those 5 hours that you scrim, how much are you learning? Right? So for example, in Heretics, we have improvement plans, we have centralized data. Everyone needs to have goals and ideas on how they want to improve, as well as performance goals as well. And still, it's not enough because we don't have time.
Well,
I'm also kind of shit at what I do. Yeah.
I mean, there's one thing I want to say about this. I think that there is a an idea overall that having a like balanced life is just better for every single person. It's like you need to be balanced. You need to have this much sleep, you need to eat, you need to work out, and then this is going to like result in happiness and fulfillment for every single person. I don't actually think that if LPL maintains this type of thing or LCK maintains this type of structure, that all the players are guaranteed to burn out. I think some of them that are prone to burnout will burn out, but I think some of the people that thrive in imbalance will actually become successful and they'll be fulfilled by what they're doing because they love what they're doing. Like, I know for myself as a person, people ask why I wake up at 4 a.m. and I watch LPL every single day. I don't live a balanced lifestyle, right? But I'm at my most like my most happiest and also the most fulfilled I've been because that type of stuff drives me. Like waking up, I want to wake up, I want to watch LPL. Like having these different activities to do, it stimulates my mind and it makes me just feel like alive and makes me feel successful as a person. And I think that that there's players like that. Like look at Rookie. He wants to grind solo queue. He wants to always be top rank in Korea. He wants to play all the scrims. And I think that sure, like some people need balanced lifestyle, but for me, that's hell. Like if I had to wake up, do a 9 to 5, eat at the same time every day, like go to like work out at the same time every day, like that type of structure is literally hell on earth for somebody like me. So I don't necessarily think that that's always going to be better for every single player. And I think that we just assume like the people like will come in and be like, oh, well, this is how like the human body works and psychology and all this stuff. And this is what everyone needs to do. I just think that there's going to be players that thrive in the imbalance. And those are the players that are going to reach the top. And I think that there are players like that. If you look at somebody like Caps, you can't tell me that if Caps made, like, let's say you took everything away. Let's say you go back to old esports and you took everything away from Caps and like he wasn't making millions. Like instead he's making like, 50K a year, 60K a year, and he could do the same job. I think he's obsessed enough with the game and he enjoys the grind enough that he would still be the same player. I don't think that people necessarily need the money as like a motivator to become good, or they need the structure that much. So that's essentially my take there, that because I feel like it's always thrown around that you need to have this perfect balanced lifestyle, and I don't think it's accurate for every single person.
Just really quickly, by the way, I'm the same, by the way. If I had to go to a 9 to 5 job, and I've done it before, I've worked a traditional job before going into esports, I would hate it as well. And I'm not saying that we need that. What I'm saying is we need support for our players. We need to make sure that there's good infrastructure, that training is directional, that we have a clear idea on what we're going to improve on. Like there's a lot of things that we can do from the performance side, from the psychology side, that we can improve on. Of course, I don't think if you want to be a top competitor, you are necessarily mentally healthy. Look at MJ in his prime years. This man was literally like working his ass off until his body broke. I mean, that is that is a part of the competition. That is a part of high performance. But at the same time, you need a lot of those support structures. What we have right now is if you don't perform, you're on the street. You don't have a future, you don't have a degree, you don't have shit. And when you finish esports, we have no plans for you whatsoever. We have no alternatives for you. And for some people, maybe it works, but for a lot of other people, that's not possible. So I'm not saying that these people need to have 10 hours of sleep a day, a wife, kids, whatever. But there is a lot of science behind having an extra hobby and increasing in performance and happiness. There is a lot of science behind having at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep, or two sleep cycles. And there's a lot of evidence behind, a lot of mental health issues that athletes are prone to when you for example, transition away from esports. A lot of players actually find it really difficult to transition away from esports, right? So these are the kind of things that we need to be improving on.
Yeah, we get all good. Right,
I'm very passionate, so I did kind of.
It's all good. It's all good. Make your own. Make fucking SeeEl's thoughts. Have a whole YouTube channel, mate. You got it already. So let's do that. Right. What I'll just say is this: the problem is when you just said that last thing there, I cannot agree with that part, because that is the problem. That is the idealized utopian dream. Is like there's actually a lot of studies, peer-reviewed, that show that it increases performance. Then go to China and Korea and get them to practice less and take up a hobby and have them be the best team there, because that would be the real way you could prove that, mate. You can't prove that in the West. You cannot prove that if people practice less, then they can beat the Korea, because no one's done it. But you could actually go there. The real test case, the control group exists, bro. It's in China and Korea. They're playing 1 billion hours. So go there, be the guy who does the revolution of sports psychology and work-life balance and hobbies, and let's be nice to people. And if someone's autistic, let's treat them like, do all that and you'll be able to prove it. So I'll just say this. I do think ultimately the problem with this is we're talking past two massive extremes. One is like you're talking about, is the most extreme version where in Korea Korea and China, essentially, you're a piece of shit and we hate you if you get an A minus. You're supposed to be A plus or get the fuck out now, which means you will only get mega winners and a load of casualties. You'll be a metaphorical stack of bodies behind you of people that it took for Flash, Faker, and all them to climb on top of to be the greatest champion ever. Right? The problem is the Westerner, Dom nailed it. The Westerner isn't like trying his best and, he just trying to keep the work-life balance. And he also, needs his motivation. Like Dom said, these motherfuckers for real, famous players who will talk shit to me about the game would literally rather sit and go, lol, I'm getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for doing nothing. That ain't cool to me, mate. It's like there's a great quote that Kobe Bryant said to Iman Shumpert, that guy who played for the Knicks, when he would play him, because Shumpert was actually a really good defender. But what Kobe would say is every time he would hit a shot, he'd just say shit to him like, the thing with you is, mate, you just don't want it enough. And that would get to him because this guy knew he didn't practice as much as him. He wasn't the guy who was putting in all the hours. He was the guy who was getting off on talent, right? That's what I would say to these pros, that you don't want it enough. By the way, my life proves it, like Dom's talking about. I could actually, for real, not only are there tons, I don't need to do 10 podcasts a week. I could do like 2 and make 75% of the same money. In the modern day, by the way, I have the company. I could just hire someone to do some of these shows and make most of the same views. And I just fucking Bing chill and, I don't know, play Bejeweled or whatever. But the point is, like he said, I actually want to do this. I am here to do this. I do want it enough. Like, I actually do twice as many videos. Are you ready? For like 10% more money. It doesn't scale at all. You know why? Because I was never doing it for the money. Now, look, along the way, I had to be smart and get my bag as well and get all that sorted. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense to do it as a job. It would just be, I'd be a nutter hermit somewhere writing old scrolls and shit. So yeah, I had to figure out the other part. But the point is, I do the videos because that's what I want to do in life. It's actually the most, people always ask me on my AMAs, what other job would you like to do? It's like, I'm doing it, bro. Like, unless someone gave me like an outrageous offer, like tomorrow you just like write this movie. You don't even have to start and grind. I would never pick anything other than this. There's the reason I put 20 years into it. So all I'll say is this. This is why, to actually sort of side with you a bit here, SeeEl, this is why I don't actually fucking have any jealousy whatsoever towards any Western coach. I think you are, Dom is right, you are in such a tough spot because even when you get 2 players like that, you get an upset and pick whoever you want, a Yankos. You get a couple of players who are that sort of mentality. They will practice, they will grind. There's still 2 or 3 that aren't, and there might be one in the team who's really good, and the team likes him, but he's actually not a guy who's ever going to grind. He doesn't put in the hours. The problem is, it's a team game, and I don't think in the West, people have figured out how you get the 5 players. And if you do, by the way, their attitudes are all probably so shit they'd all just destroy each other. Sometimes you need the levity of the young buck or some fucker who just brings the room up, but he might not be the best player. So it's why, if people know, it's not a joke. I was actually asked to coach Fnatic, and the real reason I said no, aside from the fact I have a job already, is because I don't want to coach and have those things and have people. I've always said the only game I ever considered coaching, because spoiler, I just did it secretly behind the scenes, is one-on-one games. Because when I'm friends with Nanawar, the really great StarCraft 2 player, he does grind like that, mate. He does want it more than life itself. And I'll spend time talking to that guy for 100 hours or going over the fucking what was going wrong in that tournament or what's it, because that's rewarding. I only have one guy, he's on the same page with me, and we're both working to try and get the solution. So I've always said, if League of Legends was a 1v1 game, dude, I'd coach tomorrow. I'd coach Forgiven. I'm one of the only people who could be like the Forgiven Whisperer and sort of figure out like what's going wrong. Fucking Upset is one of my favorites. Even Soaz, he's not a grinder, but he had that amazing genius vision of like what champions you could play and what you could do with it. He was like an artist in the game. The problem is, as a team game, now you're not just dealing with like the problem with this one player. You've got 5 players and the coaching staff. And you said, even if you fix your team, by the way, doesn't mean the other team scrim you. Doesn't mean they're doing the same thing. So the real problem is when we do these big abstract things like what will fix the West? It's like there was a famous saying that said, to create an apple pie, you have to create the whole universe first. That's like what it feels like to fucking level these teams up. I have to like pick apart all of esports and remodel the whole thing like some mental utopia. So anyway, let's go back to Vitality because we just got a bit off top there. But it was good though, because next week we're going to go deep on the groups. What I would say about Vitality is this. Are you ready? There's still a tiny little bit of, like, here's the thing, Dom. I am on, like, the critical bar where it's, like, flashing. And if someone hits me with one little punch, I don't parry it. I do get KO'd. Like, KO. Oh. But I've still got that little bit of energy left. And I'm going to try and Dago parry the whole thing, right? You ready?
Oh,
so
no.
Here's why this isn't the same as XL failing. I'll tell you why right now. You said it earlier. This is not a joke. This is not Corp. There were 9 games that Vitality played this split. For real, they could have won 5 or 6 of them. They looked like they were going to win 3 or 4 of them, and in the end, they won 1. Like, as you said, here's the point that I'm going to make that doesn't make sense if people tell me the dumbest conclusion of all, which is like what I referred to about Perks earlier. Oh, what really is the reason they failed, Dom, is none of the things we're talking about. It's not like their mentality, how they practice, what SeeEl's saying, how do players fit together, what would their natural style. It's none of those things. It's not coaching. It's not drafting. It's not like what their vision of the game was. It's not like, do they scream? All it is they're all 5 dog shit players that don't deserve to be in LEC and they're just not good enough at the game. Then answer me this, fans. Being as you've seen everything go wrong for this team, how the fuck were they in the majority of the games? How were they winning some of these games if they're all shit? And we all can see they don't have good comms. We can all see they're all having problems. That implies the opposite, you cretins, that actually most of the players are pretty good at League of Legends. And with SeeEl, if I take Bo tomorrow and I just put him on like fucking Weibo Gaming or something, and then I'll take Perks and I'll put him on pick about Astralis, and then I'll take Upset and then I'll put him on like, I'd put maybe Koi. You think these players aren't doing well? They're probably like all LEC players. They have it in them still. You can see it in these games. But the problem is the team concept. I've never seen it worse. Because the reason I gave the XL example is XL never even made it to game 1, bros. You remember that in the winter split? They were terrible the whole time. In fact, we saw this with Vethio, who's in your team now. He looked so bad in those first split and a half that some people were even like, you shouldn't even play in LEC. And I told people, go back and watch the episodes, bro, get this guy to a proper team with the right, I even said Jan, because it's probably the best one, get him to a proper team and you'll suddenly see he'll be one of the best mid laners again, because his talent didn't disappear. That's why the vitality discussion kills me, because people don't want to have the really interesting discussion about like what didn't work about the team, like what sort of jungler goes and what ADC, like should the solos work that way? Did Photon need to try and play through carries? Like did Perks not understand laning? These are great discussions. We can have great convos. Instead, it was just like, lol, they were all frauds all along. It's like, no, that's like the worst. That is actually, by definition, the worst take of all. Come on, guys.
I think it's one of the reasons what makes Peter Dunn so great. And I think, Freddie as well, like that coaching staff at Rogue, when they found Malrung, when they found me, right? They just knew what they needed in that team. They didn't look for the next superstar, they looked for the people that they needed. I have a very strong voice. They needed a very strong voice, and Peter Dunn is really good at that. And I think it's one of the most difficult things to do. Like, what the fuck do I know about coaching, right? Like, I don't know. I can't do what he does right now. If you put me on a team and you told me to do that, I don't think I could do that. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said. And I think that makes me like appreciate these people even more. It's a very, very hard job, this actually.
All right, since you're here, we need to have another discussion, because last time you were here, we talked about Marong. We talked about his item builds. Right? And you gave me some bullshit about how he needs lethal tempo and an executioner's culling to be able to like win this specific fight at this level. At this point, he's just fucking griefing, right? Yeah. Like if you look at it, like he is taking first strike on Vi. He's taking first strike on Vi. He's getting 100 gold in a game with this fucking first strike. He's selling his boots for 90 gold for Divine Sunderer that he gets for free. Like he actually just has something against like the economy. Like
essentially, people would report this motherfucker if you were in a solo queue game with him. Like, come on, SeeEl. Give us the angle. Come on.
You see the shit he does. Like it's just actually.
I mean, he's really he's creative, but I think is also very like he could be stubborn, right? So some of these things were pretty mind blowing. Yeah.
I appreciate that you said he's creative though. That's like someone I've got a 20 in blackjack. Like, watch how creative this is, Dom.
Here's the problem with veterans. When you work with veterans, and Malrung is a veteran if you think about it, right? And Ruby as well. Yeah. They tend to have like a lot of baggage in the way that they think. So, for example, I think I told Ruby to not buy Rod of Ages 500 times. And if you look at I could not believe what I was seeing. He built. We were in the tiebreaker against Mad Lions. Who ended up winning the split in Spring Split. And I talked about how important it is to not build Rod of Ages into 4 tanks. Just because you lose so much damage. And for him, it was a psychological safety, right? If I build this item, I'm not going to die. Right. And he still does it. I mean, it's like, you need to... If you die, sometimes it's fine. You just need to position better and play better and do more damage. So I think that some of his ideas were good last year, as I said. Like when I defended, for example, like Jav and Vi matchup, where you win like level 2 and you like... And you find him and stuff. Like some of the things he was doing was kind of creative and kind of cool, and I thought it was good. But I mean, for sure, like there is something that needs to be fixed.
I mean, there has to be some point. Like he was going electrocute zombie war.
I mean, it was very illegal. It was very illegal
in JDG. And then like this week Now this is something that I was really happy about. I predicted his item build. So he was playing Trundle this week. Marong was playing Trundle this week, and he based. And on his first base, he bought a Ruby Crystal and a Longsword. And I was like, ooh, I know where this is going. And most people are like, oh yeah, he's playing Trundle. He's going Divine Sunder, right? The Ruby Crystal builds into Kindle Gem. Longsword builds into Warhammer. You just buy Divine Sunder. And I said to Gilius live on my stream, I said, this motherfucker is going to build a Radiant Virtue and an Executioner's
Was it
Calling.
against us? I think that was against us, no?
Yeah, it might have been. Radiant Virtue, Executioner's Calling.
Okay. The game against us. Oh, the Vitality. Okay, whatever.
He built those two items. He went Ruby Crystal into Giant's Belt into Radiant Virtue and Executioner's Calling on Trundle. Like, this motherfucker is griefing on purpose. But it's like now I'm not as triggered as before, because before I had to think, and now I just know he's going for the most grief thing possible, so I can just like call it. Like, just I'm like, what would be the worst thing he could possibly build in this situation? That's what it always is. So
if you don't have any crypto, you can still play along and have some fun on Esports Bet. If you make an account, they will give you 600 DJT for free, which you can then use to place bets, make predictions. You can then, after winning more, convert that potentially into USDT. Check out the website, esportsbet.io, for more details. I'll spin this
one
into
of my proudest moments on stream.
Let's talk about Koi, because here's the thing. They're one of those teams where it's like, bro, this is why the Vitality collapse is so unbelievably disgraceful. Because as I said, some of their players clearly can do things in the game. I don't even know how Koi is where they are, like how they're winning games. Like, I do know that, like, I will say it's sad because he used to be one of the best teams. But, mate, even in this last split, I thought he was the best mid. I still think Larson might be the best mid now, mate. It's fucking ridiculous. The problem is the rest of the team just doesn't function. And they've got a bunch of players that I think are just whack. Like, I do think the jungle and support are just whack at League of Legends. I don't care what people think. I think Shigenda's all right, but he's on the wrong team. It's not on a team that knows how to play around that sort of player. And so Larson is just like fucking left on his own. Like, what is this? I'm not even hyped about this team at all. Like, I'm not going to big them up and say they're going to do anything, but they're not Vitality, I guess. So props.
Well, to give you a good insight onto what happened with Koi, I actually told them that they should keep Odo. So for me, like, one of my conditions for staying was like keeping Odo. And this is something I can talk about publicly. I mean,
he's pretty flat for a white guy. Yeah, keep going.
I don't really. The reason. Yeah, the reason for that is Larson's mind for the game is actually really, like, his awareness for what's happening inside the game in mid to late game is exceptionally good. But the problem is, the way that he communicates, he needs someone to help him communicate his thoughts. And one of the people that did really, really well, especially around side lanes, and communicating and how they should be playing around the map, was IWDominate, because they thought almost the same way. So he could funnel his ideas through IWDominate, and IWDominate could be kind of the megaphone for that team. So it's actually very important to have like a stable vocal topside. That being said, I mean, I've said for years that Shigenda should be in the LEC. I do think that this guy's a player, but then they need someone else on the other side of the map that can do that for him, right? So if you look at voice comms, you might think that Trimby was like the main caller in that team, and he did a lot of good calls, and of course, like, a lot of the early game went through the support, as it should in any team. But when it came to the mid game, when it came to lane assignments, the actual macro and decision making, it was IWDominate, and you can see that in the way that Excel play. Look at the way they play the map. Do you think that Peach, who just learned English, is calling that? Of course not. I mean, and then what happens is, if you have a top laner who's probably like the most useless role right now, and you don't have, I would say, like a competitive bot side, which I don't think that XL had a great showing in their bot side of the map, then you can't get to the stage where, you know, IWDominate can shine, where he can call these lane assignments with, for example, maybe a Vitio, right? And so what's happening in Koi right now is really sad. When I watch them play, it makes me really sad as well, because it's my old team. But that's probably what's happening.
And then you realize you're competing against them, and you're like, oh, that's actually really good for me. And then you get really happy.
No, I mean, still,
Proves your value as a coach. You know,
I'm friends with
look at how shit they are without me.
I'm friends with basically all the players there, right? And the other strong voice was obviously myself. It was like me and IWDominate being the strong voices in that team. So like, you know, that is quite upsetting. But at the same time, it's like, one of the reasons they're still winning games is because of Larson. And I think one of the best things that the Koi GM did, one of the smartest things they ever did, was keeping Larson under any circumstances. That is probably the smartest thing. I mean, I can say this right now because this guy knows how the game should be played, and he has a very good mind for patterns. And I'm not just saying that because I'm friends with him or whatever. I'm saying that because I've worked with him, and I tend to be quite impartial with the players that I've worked with. So now what you have in Koi is like a mechanically good AD carry in the form of comp, kind of like the old Forgiven in a way. And then you have a very smart mid laner. Now, if they have some sort of like vocal voice that can help him, I could see them being like a top contender at any point. So I'm always actually worried when I verse him in playoffs. They could just suddenly pop off and be a good team again. And that's really what good mid laners do, right? When you look at like G2 as well, when you play G2 in Europe, you need a good mid laner or you can't win. Like they are the final boss. When you have G2, Humanoid, and Caps, Humanoid, and Larson, they are the final bosses. You need to be able to beat them, or you're not going to win, right? And so yeah, I think that's kind of my inside scoop.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Koi, Dom?
No, I mean, all I can think about is when he made the point about like Odo being kind of like the vocal piece for that team. I thought about who they replaced him with, and they replaced him with the guy that thought it was a good idea on camera to put up both middle fingers and do like a stupid face and be like, "Ah," like on camera at LEC, where they had to like tell him, they're like, stop doing, like, please don't do it again. He had to look in his eyes again, like, hey, bro, you're gonna like put up two middle fingers. Like the cameraman told him, and you could see he's like, oh shit, I thought it would be funny. Yeah, that's probably not the guy you want to be like the social leader for your team.
I mean, from what I heard, he's very, very good for social. He's really good for team environment. He's a bit of a joker. He keeps people happy, but it's inside again, right?
Miss me on that shit. But anyway, right, let's talk about some other teams then. So since they're out already, let's just briefly address Astralis, because I have to say, this is one of the rare teams I think I did nail. Like, I remember just thinking, this team at best is whatever. And quite frankly, this is another team that, yeah, they could have won one or two more games, but like the way they played, I'm actually glad this is the other team that didn't get through. I didn't think, like, this didn't look fundamental. Like, this team had no chance to make playoffs. They weren't going to go to Worlds. Like, I'm actually, even though I don't like Koi, like I like Larson, Mad Lions, obviously you still could be good in the playoffs if they get there. Like, I don't give a fuck about this Astralis team anymore. They were cool when fucking Leader first came in, and he did prove he doesn't only play the Assassins, but I need more than this. Like, this team they had a little spike and that was it.
I think the good thing about this, Thorin, is that they have 6 months that they can now use to improve for next year. Actually, never mind. I mean, 6-month vacation. Sorry. Anyways, any points, SeeEl?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Astralis, if you want to play a certain style over and over again, which is what Astralis is, right? They have a set formula in the way they play. Like, Leader has very clear strengths. 113 has very clear strengths. Then it needs to be fundamentally sound. If it's not like a fundamentally solid game that, for example, G2 would play, you're going to get figured out, and that's the problem with this team. If you have like a fundamentally strong team that play just standard, that's your rogue. And if you have a fundamentally niche team, it's very, very hard to get further than, I'd say, top 6. Very, very hard. You're really overperforming at that point because initially people don't know what to do, but then they start to figure out, they start to like tweak their picks and bans a bit, then they figure out how to play and how you move around the map, and then it's kind of, you can't win, right? So you either need to be a team
unless you're OMG and you can just keep on iterating and just become, an actual top team in the LPL. But that's not for everyone,
Yeah, I mean, you either need to keep throwing curveballs like over and over and over again, and you have a massive champ pool like 2019 G2, Pike Top, etc., etc. Or you need to just be boring as fuck, but God, we're good at League of Legends, which I think, the Rogue Summer roster did, right?
Yeah, I think the problem for, Astralis, like when you look at it, obviously they won a game with an Azir, but that's like a random game that you win and you use that to get the respect so you don't have to play it in the future almost. Yes. Like these are the picks that you don't want to be like playing an elimination match on. And I also think that they didn't like, the thing is they got figured out, and once you get figured out to some degree, you need, like SeeEl says, you need to have more curveballs, but you also just need to like understand what is being open and like how you're going to, take these situations and actually spin them into something positive. It seemed like Astralis had no idea what to do when teams actually started thinking like Astralis. So one thing that Astralis was doing earlier is they would give Neeko, and they liked playing Yasuo into Neeko. I don't think Yasuo into Neeko is like a super good matchup, but if you play Yasuo, you can play like Rumble Top, for example, and then you have AP mixed with the Yasuo, so that Yasuo is like able to exist. And if Leader's good enough on his champions, maybe it just doesn't matter that like you give up an OP champion. Well, in their last game, the reason why they got put on this comp is the enemy team picked Neeko and then they banned Rumble, and it's like, shit, like you don't have any other AP top, so even if you do want to play the Yasuo into Neeko, like even though it was left up, you don't have anything to comp around it. They're not comfortable playing Kennen or whatever else you could play up there. So I think that was the biggest issue with Astralis, is they didn't have like enough iterations of their same draft. It doesn't necessarily need to be curveballs, but like you essentially need to get to a point if you're a niche team, as where OMG gets to, where you play enough different drafts that like the bans that they have, like you can't ban them out because they'll have enough champions to play to still be able to get their style.
And then you need to play good against them, and then they have a chance of winning. So
yeah, and that's it.
Yeah. Right, being as we're going to do a show next week anyway, we'll just eliminate G2 and Fnatic. We'll talk about them next week. So let's talk now. I want to talk a little bit about Mad Lions, because man alive, here's what's sad. I did actually say before the split, I thought they were going to be way weaker. I thought that was like a ridiculous miracle run that should never even have happened last split, because Reckless should have just hit the Nexus. But like, this is ridiculous though, because they won the first 4 games, then just lost the last 5 in a row. Like, the problem with Mad Lions is this is another team where people want to just jump out and say, gotcha, you thought they weren't going to be that good. No, they're actually all the best players at their roles. It's like, they're not, and they never were. Like, look, they're certainly not this bad. They're also not as good as they were at the first thing and in the bloody finals. Like, the problem with this team is, this is why I always give mad props generally to Mac for the coaching of this team. Like, I do think it's a bunch of flawed players. There's a couple, I think El Yoya's really good. You could argue maybe he has personality differences with people. Niski's pretty good in his own way. After that, the other 3 have certain weaknesses which can be very fucking transparent in the game. It's just sometimes mixture of draft and how they play can just cover the weaknesses enough. But even so, they will always show up. It's the reason why we always say on this show every week, SeeEl, I don't want this team to go international, and I never did, because I just think bot lane will get torn apart by all the Asian teams. Like, it'll be a nightmare in top lane. Like, I don't know how you win the game.
European for sure.
Yeah, basically. So, like, what are your thoughts on Mad Lions, SeeEl? Like, why are they in this? I mean, they're going to be in the next phase, so maybe they get it together, but it's looking fucking bad now.
I mean, what I can tell you for sure is after 4 wins, they were basically locked into groups, right? So, I mean, Peter's worked with Mac as well, and my understanding of the situation is after that, it's all about mixing and matching, seeing what picks they can play, and kind of testing. Like, they're not really trying to get first place in the regular season. They never have been. And his processes have been proven, right? So one of the reasons I really wanted to work on the Mac was, if you look at his track record, he might not have the best regular season record, but when it comes to playoffs, he finds enough iterations of what actually works, and he's actually willing to go on stage and try stuff out. So that's kind of my hypothesis. And you can really tell that this is a very well-coached team, because just the way that they move on the map and their systems and the way that they play. A lot of credit goes to Niski as well. Like, I personally think Niski's big issue is like his laning phase. I think there are so many mistakes that he makes inside lane, and he gives like too much gold through there. But what he does is he makes a jungler look really good, and he makes a team move around the map really well, especially around side lanes. So like, my hypothesis is, yeah, they're 4-5, but they're probably going to be a decent team in playoffs. I don't think they're missing out on Worlds this year, and I can definitely see them going international. Now the issue is, once again, like, if you have a very, very strong laner, this is where I think Niski tends to like struggle a little bit. I do think Niski has proven himself in the LCS and the LEC, right? But like, if he plays against a Knight, I mean, then the game is kind of snowballed already through mid, and then mid will transfer pressure into side lane. So that's kind of what happens. And then when you fall behind like that, then your side lanes are in big trouble, which is why when Matt had a motivated humanoid, that roster looked quite strong, I think, even like internationally. Of course, a few things needed to be changed, but yeah, I mean, that's my hypothesis on the situation. Or maybe they're just complete garbage, right? Maybe that's just what's happened and they've imploded. But I really doubt it, and I really don't think so.
I mean, also, if you look at it from Mad Lions' perspective, like, assuming that G2 and Fnatic are the 2 best teams, which they like were clearly, they don't really care which group they get into, because the 3rd and 4th seeds, like, by them falling down to 7th, 8th, the 3rd and 4th teams that they would be playing against, like, no offense, Heretics and XL, I don't think Mad Lions is like shitting their pants and feels like they can't beat them if they get themselves in form, right? So there's not really a big issue with coming in 7th, 8th place in groups. It's really just you make top 8.
All offense taken, man. I'll take that one personally. So I got to work extra hard.
Okay, let's see it.
No, but I completely agree with you. By the way, one thing I do disagree with you on Thorin is I do think that Kazi is really fucking good. Like, I don't think that I've always said that.
Quantify it then. Don't just say really good. That's vague as fuck. Is he the best DC? Is he contender for best?
I think he's top 3. I think he's always been top 3. I don't think he was the problem in Vitality. I do think that he needs a specific play style and he needs a specific team around him, right? But what player doesn't at this point, right? Even in traditional sports, what player doesn't? So I do think that if you look at Kazi's stats, if you look at his numbers, if you look at the way he moves around the map, if you look at the way that he team fights, his aggression is something to be valued. And paired with Hylissang, I do think that the move to Hylissang from Fnatic was almost illegal. Like the fact that they got him for free, like to pair with Kazi, who I think is like possibly the best possible like AD carry for Hilly, was insane to me. And I was so surprised that this happened.
I mean, I know what you referred to. It's basically, I think Dom might have even made this point in the past. Essentially, he does play a bit like an LPL ADC where he just goes on the like absolute edge of the mechanics and try and get the most damage in the fight. Whereas I will say, this is like not the era. It's why he doesn't play League of Legends anymore. It's not the era to have like a reckless guy who's like, oh, hold back, like it's 2014, like it's just the right angle to go in on. Like that's not really how ADC's played now. If you watch the LPL, like, it's just not that way. Like so. Yeah. If you've never made a bet on esports bet before, let me tell you about an alternative bonus. They're risk-free first-time bet. For your first ever bet up to 100 USDT stake, they will refund it if you lose. So you just place your bet, and if you indeed happen to lose, whoever you pick to win, then you go to the Discord, discord.gg/esportsbet, message the mod mill, say you did the risk-free first-time bet. They will credit your account up to 100 USDT original stake. Right, what about this then? A team that obviously did very well, no one could have expected it really, is XL, Dom. I want to get your thoughts on this first, because here's the problem. Even though they're technically third in the league and they're going in and the pick, I just don't buy it at all, mate. Like,
I have no confidence in them.
Better, but I still think a bunch of these players are just whatever.
So if XL and Mad Lions play a best of 5 tomorrow, and XL is third easy, and Mad Lions is 7th, who are you putting your life on if you have to bet it?
Easy, you know? Mad Lions, yeah.
If Hylissang takes me out, like he takes me out, you know, I'm putting it on Hilly. So it's just the way they play is so like, it's so boring. And then also I think it's like pretty exploitable. Like sure, they have some angles where they're pretty much just going to play tank jungle every single time. I mean, they play Maokai and Sejuani, so some people ban them, and then they play the Mumu, which is good. But this has to be something that can be exploited. You just know what's coming, and I think that XL is so easy to prep for because of that. You look at all their champion pools. I mean, what do they do? Like they're going to pick Azir if it's up. You know, they're going to pick tank jungler every single game. I just feel like if you play like a solid game and you don't make mistakes and you just do the right things, you'll just win versus XL. But if you do nothing and you buy into their game, then I think they'll beat you.
Okay.
Pretty simple.
I think we just played so fundamentally bad against them. And the truth is, I think they're just mid, right? They're not anything special. Like even if you brought Odo, who's like very, very competitive and defensive about like his teams, I don't think you'd disagree, right? They're just average. And really, in our matchup against them, it's more so that we played so terribly that they ended up winning. It was not a case of XL being incredible. So for me, it's like they don't have curveballs. They just play fundamentally decent, but not good enough where I'm super concerned about the way they play. Right.
My problem is this. When you've got Ordoan there, we discussed this earlier, like he's at his best. Well, I mean, theoretically, you could have a whole discussion about this, but if you just look historically, he is at his best at helping mid and ADC be the stars of the team. That is what he is probably the best Western top laner ever at. So the problem is, when you look at the players they have on XL, like Patrick's had a better split. He's doing pretty well again. I think Abadagi is one of the most overrated European players ever. Even when he was at his like peak on the Shilke Miracle run, that was like a couple of BO1s. What did they do after that? Then you go and look when he was in 100 Thieves. Bro, he used to just like int half the regular season, then just sort of like do well in like 1.5 playoff splits, like series or whatever. Like, I think this guy's so overrated. Like, he's all right. He's like above average mage player. After that, what is there to his game, you know? Certainly not, like you put it this way, on this team, he'd have to be like an MVP candidate if you want him to do something. He's definitely not. Like, I'm not putting him in that category at all. So I'm a hater in that regard. I don't care how many games you have where you get 7 kills, mate. Fuck off. And I think that Peach guy, if anyone's like, this proves that he is good, it doesn't prove anything. It proves how shit LEC is right now, if anything. Like, the Peach guy is doing nothing. I don't even know what he's supposed to be getting off this, mate.
That's something I wanted to ask SeeEl about, because when I've been talking to like LEC players, and I mean, even Gilly has said on my stream that he went to a party yesterday and he was talking to pretty much all the teams, and everyone says in LEC that the level is fucking terrible. Like, this is like one of the worst levels of LEC ever. Do you think there's any truth to that? Like, where do you stand on the level of LEC currently? Do you think it's being like underrated, or do you think that LEC right now is actually like at a much lower level than expected?
Yeah, we're so fucking bad. Like, if we played against in previous years, if we played against VCS, I think we would win every time. But if we played against VCS tomorrow, I'm not sure if we'll win. The only exception for me right now is G2. Like, the way they move around the map, the way that they play. Like, look at the comp that we played yesterday. We had Kai'Sa, Zera, Yuumi. We're outscaling, we're outranging, and they're just moving around the map better than us. That's what it was. Yeah, I mean the level is quite horrendous, and this is coming from someone that takes a lot of pride in being in Europe, right? And I can see a world where a lot of our teams lose to C9 and EG. So this might be yeah. So this
I'm
might
gonna
be
run with that. Oh, I'll be so insufferable. You know, I hang around with like 7-8 Europeans in a call all day. Like, oh my god, I'm gonna 1v7 them.
That's just a fact. So I mean, it's not. I mean, before I looked at their game and I just thought it was not possible. But the way that we play right now is really not good. And I don't think that this Peach guy was that bad. He just wasn't a standout. And that's the problem, right? Like when you have Odo, he makes other pieces. He's like a buff. He's like a blue or red buff. You know, he makes you like so much better. But you need the pieces. And I'm not sure how good these pieces are, right?
Yeah, but to go back to what you said earlier, the difference is when he is paired with the right players.
Exactly.
An above average jungler. Like he actually could be good, but obviously in this team he was bad. But the Peach guy's just like whatever. He's just
I mean, I would never pair Xerxes with Vitiyo. I just don't think that combo would work. So yeah, I think that was a problem. I
mean, Yanko's Vetio is probably one of the best pairings you could ever have. Like he allows Vetio to be pretty much the best version of himself.
Exactly.
Right.
And by the way, I want to add, by the way, and I want to give a bit of praise to my mid laner. When I judge talent and when I look for X factor, one of the things that kind of stand out to me are the ability to play things in the moment and perform at a really, really high level. Because it just shows that you have a depth in champion pool and that you're able to be flexible, right? And you heard the story about the Kaiser LeBlanc, right? So what happened was, Dom, if you don't know, what happened was Vincent comes in. Yeah. Oh, okay. So basically, for the viewers, you know, Vincent comes on. So Vitiyo comes on, and he says, "Oh, Perks is going to play LeBlanc today, so give me LeBlanc." And so Peter Dunn, being the reasonable guy he is, like, "Hey, at least like practice it in warm ups, right?"
Kaiser, right?
Kaiser into LeBlanc. I think he goes 0-4-0 or something. Completely runs it down. Then he's like, "Trust me, it's good. We pick it." And in that moment, what I told myself was, normally, by the way, I veto this. Normally, I just say, guys, please, like, we're not doing this. We need to win this. We need to make regular season. But I saw this guy move. I saw this guy play his movement. And I was like, maybe he has it. So I just said, yeah, whatever. Fuck it. Let's pick it. And his performance that day showed me that he has X factor. I think that this guy has so much upside. You need the right environment and you need the right coaching and you need the right teammates to enable. And the fact that he's with Jankos is so good because I think he can learn so much about the game and kind of like pair up his weaknesses. Because remember, like Jankos played with probably the best mid laners. And by the way, I think Perks is still one of the best. And the fact that people are saying like Perks out and damaging his legacy is really wrong.
What makes him one of the best still then? Because obviously everyone's going to say he's shit because of these splits.
I mean, he's just a leader and he knows how the game works. Like every single member in that 2019 G2 roster, I promise you, knows how to win the game, right? Yeah. And that is not easy in any region. It doesn't matter if it's Korea or China or NA. It is not easy, and they know how to win at a high level. Why? Because they played in the bloody World Finals, mate. You don't fucking forget that, right? And they played at the highest level in the LEC for years and years and years. So remember, Jankos knows how it's like to play with one of the best probably the best mid laners, the best mid laners that EU has ever produced. So he knows exactly what to say and how to teach this guy and what he needs as well. And so it circumvents it fixes a lot of the issues that maybe Vincent was having. And I'm really excited to see where this guy ends up.
Right, here's what we're going to do. The only teams we haven't talked about is SK and BDS, and there's only 10 minutes before I have to do another 4 hours of fucking talk shows. So I'm vetoing SK. We'll talk about them in the groups one, and I just don't give a flying fuck. Like I told people, they're just mid as fuck. So let's talk about BDS, because obviously this is the team that unironically could have won the last split. They could have been at MSI. They didn't. And our take on this show, funnily enough, was they'd be like 4th or 5th team, believe it or not, SeeEl. So without making it mega long, give us some thoughts on BDS.
Okay, I'll make it super quick. I think Crownie is the bot lane is the Niski of bot lane. Whatever team he goes on, he'll make the team at least fundamentally a decent level. And he's a good player. Like he messaged me last year and he's saying, how can I make it back to LEC? Because he was in academy. And I told him, mate, you're already better than half the fucking 80s are here. You know? So that's the strength of Crownie. Now, where they're struggling is I'm not sure how they're going to balance the resources because Crownie's really good at getting himself fed. But Adam is also very, very resource hungry. So if Adam has a performance where he's not able to soak 1v2, this is going to be a problem for them, right? And that's what Adam has been traditionally good against, and that's why they saw a lot of the successes where he was able to win 1v2s undertowered. He was able to roam mid. And Nuke also had like good performances, I think. It was very, very surprising because I always thought that Nuke was, I mean, no offense to him, he's always been nice to me, but like mid or like less than mid. But this year he showed that he was a solid player with the right mindset, right? So it's all going to be about, okay, how much can Adam absorb that pressure? How well is Sheer going to balance resources between top and mid, and how consistent is Nuclear going to be? I'm not really worried about Crowny and Labrov because I think that they're both really good players.
Thoughts, Tom?
BDS is hard to watch for me. They're really hard to watch because I feel like they tried to expand what they did, and you see how limited they are now by the regression back to like, let's just pick a Zero every time it's up. Like, you know, Cassio, if it's a good game, Syndra, whatever, we just pick these champions. They tried to go the Nico route, play Annie, these types of like engagers. It just didn't work at all. They are just one style. They'll play like similar champions, and if you let them do it, they'll win a lot of these games. It's still upsetting to me seeing Adam get his Olaf like every fucking game. Like, he just gets it so often. I mean, he almost made that game where he's now like not winning lane every time. People are comfortable enough with Olaf where they're winning the game, but there's always a point in the game where I'm watching Adam play Olaf where I'm like, yeah, Fnatic, this 3v1 bot where he just killed you and they got bear. This is probably why you don't give him Olaf here, because like, he's not going to do that if he's playing another champion, right? If he plays Renekton, he's not going to do that. So for me, watching BDS, I just feel like they're just a worse version of themselves. Their champions are not as good as they were. And I think the player that's been struggling the most to me is Sheo. I feel like Sheo he's lost in a lot of the games. And for somebody who's being like touted as the best jungler or one of the best junglers in Europe, in spring, I feel like he's just regressed. He's not seeing the game as well. He's doing things that don't make sense. One of the things that I valued about Sheo's gameplay in spring was his ability to see how a team fight was going and playing on a tether with his carries, like knowing like, I need to walk up a couple steps so that they can hit. Okay, my AD carries can't hit right now, so I'll back off. Their cooldowns are down. He was playing that game so well, and now when I see him play, it just seems like he's just unaware of where Crowny is or where Nuke is, and he'll just kill himself in team fights by just going too deep. So I'm not sure. Like, there's some games where I watch them play, like that Poppy game that Sheo played where he's like 100 CS down. I mean, I believe that was the one that they played versus Fnatic, right? Where he's 100 CS down on Poppy 0-0-1. It's like, how did you not get objectives, get farm, get a gank off? Like, you didn't do one thing the entire game as jungler. You're literally just AFK, and your team almost won the game anyway. It's hard for me to watch. So I'm not sure where they're going to end up. I just feel like they're a very like mediocre team. I'd be very surprised to see them make playoffs.
Right, here's my final statement, and then we're going to wrap it, and I've got to go do a bunch of stuff. Right, I'll just say this. I'm actually with Dom completely, like most of the same angles. Like, Crowley's really good. Adam just is the same bullshit he's been for 2 years now, but somehow he gets away with it because that's how fucking bad the LEC and top lane is right now. It's actually criminal. Like, if this guy played 1 second of his life against like the elite Asians, he is getting his shit pushed in every single game, even on those champions he's supposed to be really good on, by the way. It wouldn't even matter. But that's what it is anyway. That's what it's always been, even when they were winning. My problem is the Sheo angle, because I think Sheo essentially propped up Nuke. And by the way, I'm not even going to call you Nuke. Your name is Knock because you suck. You get to be Nuke when you're like a Nuke, really dangerous, threat that you can always win. All I'll say is this is my best way to say it, because I've always thought Nook is mid as fuck. Here's all I need to say. It's the final remark on any team in this show, is this. Everyone, you love to tell me when my boy Larson was at his peak, and I thought he was MVP caliber, a bunch of those splits in the past. He's just a boring mid lane mage player. No, Nook is a boring mid lane mage player. Watch when they play the same champions, the fucking difference. And if you can't see it, you got no eye test, mate. One of them wins and carries the game on those mages. The other one on them is just average as fuck, or just looks like he almost plays for KDA sometimes. Like, just there's fucking nothing going on. There's no threat whatsoever. And those are his champions, by the way. Those are the shit that you go and see him play before he was in the LEC. Like, there's just nothing there. So once his jungler magically wasn't doing awesome anymore, his whole game fell apart. Meanwhile, he still has probably one of the best ADC, arguably, in the fucking LEC on his team. Like, give me a break. Right. Obviously, people like Vitality, and in fact, everyone in the league, they get a break now. All the teams that have made it to the groups, they have a week off now, but we don't, because we'll be back next week to preview the groups.